think that's not gonna fall. We'll see. Nobody's here, so I don't have to worry. Oh, it switches it. Okay. Okay, I see one person watching. This is what happens when I run late, apparently. Everybody gives up on me. So I'm trying to fix this. How late am I here? Okay. I'm not going to start reading until there's more people because otherwise there's no point. But since I now see 7 people. Hi, I'm Erin M. I'm the author of the Brimstone Angels Saga. And I am here at Welcome Forgotten Realms Archives members. I'm here to read from Brimstone Angels. Yeah, just as I don't understand why the camera flips it, but for some reason it's happened on the last one too. So everything's backwards, but definitely real. This was interesting because I forgot how tiny the text in this is, so it'll be fun to read from. I think the last time I saw the poll, it said the scene with the whiskey, so that is what I am expecting to read. But if somebody remembers better than me, do let me know before I start. Where did it go? Where's the beginning? Okay. I don't need that note. Okay. Oh, come on. Really? Like 9 people? I'm sorry I'm late. My baby had one of the fun things, and by fun I mean not fun, is when you have a baby who has had epileptic episodes, when they do the kind of weird things that babies tend to do when they're sick and they're tired and they're babies, you have to assume it's something really bad. So he had to go to, that's why this got rescheduled. He had to go to the emergency room last week because he was making a weird face. Yeah. So we just made sure, we just went back, talked to the neurologist and said, yes, that's a weird face. But that's why I'm running a little late, because everything takes 20 minutes to get to from here. It is a little scary. Thank you very much. But it is definitely, it's a good thing. Overall, it's a good thing. I also seem to recall from the last time I did this that I need to remember to read the comments that I'm responding to, so it doesn't just look like I'm talking out into the void. I guess because I'm running late, I might as well go ahead and start. So I'll introduce myself again. I'm Erin M. I am the author of the Brimstone Angels Saga, which just finished with the last book, The Devil You Know, which I don't have a copy of out here. This is my office. The guy back there is the guy I married. Don't pay any attention to him and whatever's on the screen, because 1, it's probably boring, and 2, it's probably secret. And I am going to read to you from Brimstone Angels, which, as I said before, is backwards because there's something with the camera and Facebook Live that they don't like to be friends. So if you are a fan of Forgotten Realms, but you have never read my books, this is a wonderful way to get a taste and see what you think. The first book, I will tell you, is out of print, but I have many copies like this one because I knew it was going out of print. So I bought a bunch. And they're for sale on slushlush.com. They're also available as ebooks and audiobooks narrated by the brilliant Dina Perlman, who always manages to pronounce all the weird words that I jam in there. So the last time I saw the poll, people wanted to hear the scene with whiskey. So that's what I'm going to read. This is not too far in. Where the story, okay, so the story, if you're unfamiliar, is about a tiefling warlock named Farida, who kind of accidentally makes a pact with a Cambion. And she makes the pact because her sister accidentally is trying to summon an imp so she can practice her trapping skills, and she kind of misses, and she gets this Cambion instead. And her sister is the protective one, so when she gets sort of left behind to watch the monster while Havilar goes and gets their dad, Mehen, he talks Farida into a pact largely because she worries a lot about her sister, and you may get an inkling why. This is after that, after they have left their village that they grew up in, and after they have met one of the characters who will become an important part of the series, Bryn, who has a mysterious past. The only other thing that I think would be good to mention before I start, this is great for doing a Q&A after, because I think there's a pretty good mix of people who are like longtime readers who just think this sounds like fun, and people who haven't read the series before. If you have specific questions about The Devil You Know, maybe let's wait till the end for that, or maybe we just skip this entirely and do it then. And then general questions about Forgotten Realms or Brimstone Angels or this book, so we'll just open floodgates. It's fine. Okay. Okay, he has his headphones in, so he's not gonna get distracted. Havilar they're in an inn. Havilar has snuck out the window to go find this boy that they met in the caravan before. And Farida did not want her to do that because it's a terrible idea. So, a grunt and the frenzied sound of hands scrabbling at roof tiles made her look up. One pale hand clutched at the sill. "Fairy!" Havilar hissed from beyond. "Come help before someone hears." "Gods," Farida muttered, but she went to the window. The boy from the caravan clung to the window frame, looking up at her as if seriously reconsidering whatever her sister had said to convince him to scramble halfway up the slippery shakes of the roof, braced only by Havilar, who in turn braced herself against the gutter by one heel. "What happened to no one will see me?" Farida hissed, taking hold of the boy's arm and hauling him in. Havilar scrambled up after him and grabbed a hold of her sister's hand. "Nobody did see," she said. She clambered over the sill and glanced back into the darkness. "But maybe he should leave by the door. I nearly broke my neck on the way out." She grinned at Farida. "Did you see my landing? It was..." She trailed off, sniffing. The hot and bitter scent of the portal opening still laced the air, faint but unavoidable. Havilar's expression grew concerned. Farida glared at her. After all of Havilar's complaints, Lorcan had come because she had left. Havilar rolled her eyes, as if to say, to the hells with Lorcan anyway. Farida glanced over at the boy. If he smelled the traces of Lorcan's portal. He was looking around the room, as if he didn't want to let his eyes settle. He looked at the walls, the locked door, the bed, the floor, the cold fireplace, and finally, at Farida. "Is everything all right?" he said. Did you not want me to come?" Havilar said. "No," Farida said. "It's not that. I just didn't want Havilar to go out." "Well, now we're in," Havilar said. "And Mehen is going to come back eventually. What do you think he's going to say when he finds out you snuck a boy in here?" "Bryn," the boy said. And Mehen didn't see. He looked at Havilar. "Should I call him Mehen, or is it Goodman something?" Havilar giggled. "Just Mehen. He doesn't have a clan name." "It's not funny," Farida said, more sternly than she meant to. "It's better if no one knows there's a pair of tieflings rooming here." "Just everyone who saw us in the tap room," Havilar said sarcastically. She sat down on the floor and pulled Farida down beside her. "Bryn, give her some whiskey before she has a fit." Bryn sat down beside them, drawing a half-empty bottle of brown liquor out of his pack. Farida frowned. "Where did you get that?" Downstairs. The tavern master sold you a half bottle of whiskey? No, Bryn said. He tried to charge me an arm and a leg for space on the tavern floor. I thought it was fair to even things out a bit. You stole it? It was mutual stealing, Havilar explained. Like how you can kill someone if they're trying to kill you. All right, it sounds stupid, Bryn said hotly, but it was the only thing I could reach. He looked at Farida, puzzled. Are you feeling all right? Your cheeks are all red. I'm fine, she said automatically. She pressed a hand to her face. Just, it was harder to pull you in than I thought. At least having some refugee boy in the room was better than Mehen finding her with Lorcan. If he came in now, it would be Havilar's fault, too. Havilar grinned madly at Bryn, as if she'd caught a particularly tricky beast in one of her traps. You didn't think I'd manage, did you? She said to Farida. I was hoping you wouldn't. Havilar looked past her and frowned. Why did you bolt the door? To herself, Farida cursed. Safety. She hurried to the door and undid the bolt without meeting Havilar's eyes. You're still just frustrating at Lorcan, she thought. You can't take that out on Havi. Or Bryn. Bryn yanked the cork free and paused, staring at the open bottle. I never said thank you. He looked up at Farida. For saving me. And I should apologize, too, to both of you. I wasn't in my right mind, I suppose. But it still was terribly rude to assume you were devils. Even if you had been, you did me a good turn. Farida relaxed a little. Maybe Havilar was right. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe it would be normal. I don't have any glasses, Bryn said apologetically. I hope that's all right. Bryn, we live on the road, Havilar said. We're used to not drinking out of glasses. Oh, right, he said, taking out a handkerchief to wipe the mouth of the bottle. And I suppose Mehen doesn't stand on etiquette. Havilar snorted. God, can you imagine Mehen teaching us how to curtsy and take tea? Put your damn back straight, she bellowed. You curtsy from the hip, not the knee. You're leaving yourself wide open for a snub from the Queen of Tethir. Farida giggled. No, 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 she growled back. Finish! How many times do I have to tell you? You pass the biscuits with your offhand so you can parry the czar with your stronger arm. Havilar laughed so hard she pounded the floor. Bryn took a sip from the whiskey bottle. How long have you been traveling with him? Forever. Havilar took the whiskey bottle from him. He adopted us. He's our father. That took Bryn a moment to absorb. But, he finally said, you call him Mehen, not father. Dragonborn call their parents by name, Farida said. What happened to your real parents? Bryn said, and Farida felt a surge of irritation. Mehen was a real parent, more so than whoever had left them behind. But she bit her tongue. She knew what he meant, even if she didn't like the way he said it. Havilar shrugged. Someone left us at the village gates. And there wasn't a note or a clue in the blankets? Oh, I see people are commenting. I actually can't see that while I'm reading, obviously. I'll go back. Okay, where was it? Farida and Havilar glanced at each other. Arushbayam was the sort of place people went to hide from their past, to start over right when that wasn't possible in other lands. They both knew that if someone had left a pair of babies at the gates of Arushbayam, there was no need of a message to say that they didn't want the twins back. It's not a story, Bryn, Farida said. She sipped the whiskey. It tasted sharp and woody, and the burn of alcohol tickled her throat. We're not the secret princesses of a beer or something. Where are your parents? Havilar asked. Oh, Bryn said vaguely, off somewhere. They're adventurers, you know? He glanced up at them for a moment, as if he were weighing something against their expressions, and Farida wondered what it was. They go away for years, and so I ended up at a strict Tormish school. He took a careful sip of whiskey. I left. I'm not cut out to be Tormish. Havilar snorted. I'll say, Tormites don't steal whiskey. They do buy it, Bryn said. A look of discomfort passed over his features and was gone. Where's your village? Near Timanther, Farida said, in the Smoking Mountains. You won't have heard of it, Havilar said. It's a secret village. Farida sighed. What? Havilar said. She took a sip of the whiskey. Who is he going to tell? She turned back to Bryn. It's just a village of people who don't want to be found. Farida stopped herself from sighing again. You mean criminals? Bryn asked, excitement creeping into his voice. She means outcasts, Farida said. She passed the bottle back to him. It's just a village of people who didn't belong somewhere else. Lots of Dragonborn, Havilar said. It seems like it's rather easy to get cast out of a clan, if you ask me. And humans who didn't fit in somewhere. And tieflings, Farida said, who don't fit in anywhere, Havilar said with a giggle. Also, 2 half-orcs and a dwarf that raises yaks. Beg pardon? Inheritance dispute, Farida said, giggling to herself. He says he wanted to quit his clan, right? Don't ask him about it, Havilar said, taking the whiskey, or you will know far too much about his brother-in-law. Far too much. If I ever find your secret village, Bryn said, I'll make certain I avoid it. Why did you leave? To find your parents? Farida dropped her eyes and shut her mouth. Havilar took an extra long swig of whiskey that ended with a gasp and a cough. Whew! She cried. This is strong. Bryn was watching them carefully, his eyes skipping from one to the other. The longer they didn't answer, Farida thought, the more he'd think of his own reasons. And the more he thought of his own reasons, the more awful those reasons might become. Robbery, murder, devil worship. Were they worse than binding yourself to a devil you couldn't say no to? Even outcasts have outcasts, Farida said lightly. We were involved in some mischief that upset the wrong people. It wasn't on purpose, but people were upset. Bryn's eyes lit, as if he knew exactly what she meant, and he nodded. She could sense Havilar beside her, relaxing into the safe blandness of that explanation. They might keep him still. I have certainly been acquainted with those circumstances, Bryn said. Is that why you had to leave? Havilar asked, passing Farida the bottle. From wherever you're from? I didn't have to leave. Again, that look of discomfort. It was starting to rattle on Farida's nerves, and the whiskey did nothing for it. She wrapped her hands around the top of the bottle, pressing her palms into the glass, and willed the shadows not to gather around her. Truth is, I'm from Cormier, he finally said. I guess I don't really fit there, with my family and such. It seemed better that I got out of their way. Out of their way? Havilar said. What are they, rampaging Tarasques? Bryn chuckled. Not quite that bad. More like rampaging dire bears, but with more rules. They don't appreciate mischief any more than secret villages do. I don't think anyone appreciates having a building blown up, Havilar said. Farida's every muscle stiffened. Havi! Bryn's mouth fell open. Is that what you did? Sort of, Havilar said. Why? How? He was positively goggling. On accident, Farida said. It's not going to make a difference, she thought. He's already made up his mind. They would have to run. It was magic gone awry. It was my fault, Havilar said quickly, her face as red as Farida, who's sure her own was. I was doing spells that were too powerful. Nobody died. Nobody really got hurt. Her hand closed on Farida's. It was our own house. Bryn glanced from one to the next and finally shook his head. Well, you have me beat. The worst thing I'd ever done was run away. Granted, he added, I didn't make a point of doing so regularly enough. Farida took a swig of whiskey and passed it on, grateful that Havilar had diffused the situation, but angry that Havilar again took responsibility. Farida had made the pact. She made the decision. She hadn't stumbled into it. It was her doing alone. If anyone was to blame, it was Farida. If anyone got hurt, it was Farida too. Bryn frowned. But why were you doing spells? You're not a spellcaster. I can cast a little bit of magic, Havilar said, just not very well, apparently. I'm better with blades, and Farida's better with magic, that's all. He turned to Farida. You're a sorcerer, aren't you? Is the explosion what happened to your eye? Farida's cheeks were still burning. No. It's always been like that, Havilar said quickly. Mahen says it happens sometimes. It happens a lot more in dogs. It just surprises some people because, well, silver and gold look strange to humans. Havi, Farida said, and her sister stopped. She looked at Bryn hard. It's just an eye. All right, he said. I really didn't mean any offense. I suppose you hear that a lot. I do hear that a lot, she said after a moment. It doesn't take much for some people to be superstitious. They don't know any better, Bryn said with a wave of his hand that Farida had to remind herself wasn't supposed to be dismissive, even if it felt like it, even if it made anger squeeze tight around her chest. I thought you might be a wizard at first, but you don't have a spell book. Or, she said lightly, a lot of patience. Sorry, I snapped. He grinned. Here. He handed her back the bottle of whiskey. Friends? For now, Farida thought gloomily. She took the whiskey from him. Friends, she said. She raised the bottle before taking a sip and passing it on to Havilar. To winning, Havilar said before taking her own turn. She giggled. I don't care what Mahen says. I think all 7 orcs count. To Neverwinter, Bryn said, and new beginnings. What will you do in Neverwinter? Farida asked. Though it had been a little cruel of Havilar to point it out, he wasn't cut out to build houses and haul rocks. Bryn shrugged. Whatever someone will pay me for. I'll save it up, and... He trailed off and took another, bolder sip of the whiskey. and do something I want to do. Why Neverwinter? Havilar asked. It's up at the edge of the world, and it's fallen down. I heard anyway. Do you have a lady friend up there? Bryn chuckled. No, I don't know anyone in Neverwinter, truth be told. He hesitated a moment. Look, I'm not a refugee, really. No one in my family's from Neverwinter, but I think I could pass. Start a life of some sort. New beginnings, as I said. So long as your house hasn't already fallen down, Havilar said with mock solemnity. I hear, too, that it's teeming with monsters and volcanoes. And orcs, Bryn said, and warlocks. Farida froze. Warlocks? Right, the hellish sort. That's what they say, anyway. He shrugged. I don't know. I read somewhere some devil tried to take Neverwinter over once. Maybe even an archdevil. Ages ago, though, before the spell plague. So maybe that's why they all go there. But it's probably nonsense. People say all sorts of things. I mean, do you know how many stories people tell about how the city got its name? Farida nodded, not really hearing Bryn. If Neverwinter were full of warlocks, there had to be at least one among them who knew how to keep a devil in hand. It stood to reason, didn't it? That Farida could not be the only warlock in Toril who didn't start down the path with the intention of being wicked, and she couldn't be the only one with a devil who wouldn't leave her alone. If she went to Neverwinter, she might find someone who would show her a way to at least give Lorcan pause, perhaps someone to show her how to leash him. If she could keep him from turning up so often, if she could keep him from needling at her brand, if she could keep him at arm's length, then what? He might strip away her powers just to show he could. He might do something to punish her. He might hurt Behead or Havilar. He might leave her entirely. I lost. Oh, I don't know how long I got away. Hope that wasn't quick. Because at the end, she says, Havilar said, pressing the whiskey bottle into her hand. Catch up, worrywart. Okay, so that was a scene from Brimstone Angels, the first book of the Brimstone Angels saga, which I just completed with book number 6, The Devil You Know. I'm going to scroll back through the comments and see if any of those things are questions, but if you have questions, you can ask them, and when I get back down, then I can answer them. And if there are no actual people here who are, if everybody who hasn't read this book is already in the waiting for hero zone, then you guys can ask me whatever you want. Let's see. Uh-oh. Did the video not work? I see someone saying they had a picture but no video. Okay, wait. These are some very nice things. I'm glad you all are excited for this and that you like the books. Because I really, really loved writing these books. It was a wonderful part of my life. When you read your own writing, do you remember what was going on in your life when you wrote it? Sometimes. That one, not so much. That was one of those scenes that I you get these characters and you want them to interact. And so it was one of those scenes where I knew how they would talk to each other, and it was fun to write because you just kind of fell into it. The only thing I do remember was that the original version of this, Farida was just going to Neverwinter because they were going to Neverwinter, because I was told to write a book in Neverwinter. And my editor read the first draft and said, she doesn't really have an external arc. She's not trying to do something until other people are trying to make something happen to her. And that was a really good point. Like, I really hadn't thought of something for her to do. She had a strong internal arc. Like, there was something about herself that was changing as she went through this. But she didn't really have a goal at the start. It wasn't until, like, bad guys start intersecting and she's, like, reactive. And so putting in that part about Neverwinter being full of warlocks, and suddenly Farida has a good reason to go to Neverwinter. Because she's got this pact and she's new to it and it doesn't work the way she wants it to. So I do remember that part. There's also a part right before this where she's alone in the inn-room and Lorcan shows up, and the first time I wrote it, he's being kind of predatory flirty, and they hit a point where like I couldn't make the scene keep going. And I was like, what's happening here? And I realized somebody needed to show up and somebody needed to interrupt them. And that's where Serchi came from. If you've read the series, you know Serchi is a very important character. She's Lorcan's sister. But she was not in my outline. I had no idea that character existed. So it wasn't until I was writing that scene where they're stuck in this room and nothing's happening, except they're talking to each other. They're just kind of reinforcing their dynamic. So that's kind of cool. If your book, I missed this book, mine went missing. I said this at the beginning, and I'll say it again. I have paperback copies of this signed for sale on Slush Slush. I find I always go into used bookstores and try to see if any of my books are there, and I'm usually delighted to find there are no copies, because that means that people are buying them and keeping them. So around me anyway, they're hard to find at used bookstores, but if you can find them at a used bookstore, it is cheaper. The ebook is probably cheaper, but if you want a hard copy, I sell them on Slush Slush, and they'll be signed. That was a fun scene, but I wish you had read something that had Dragonborn speech. I'd like to see / hear you pronounce those words. I have to admit, I did not, my Dragonborn words, largely, I made to look cool, and then the audiobook deal came through, and I felt really bad, because they're really hard to say. I did usually I do a charity D&D game, and I usually end up playing a character from my books, and once I played Havilar, and I tried very hard to say Karshoji. It's really hard to switch from English to saying Karshoji. It doesn't come out of your mouth right. It's this shift that happens in the phonemes. It's not fun. So I don't know how they do that. And actually that brings up a question that I don't know the answer to, which is I assume that they have a little bit of an accent because like they're learning to speak from Mahen, who absolutely has an accent because he speaks Chimanther and Draconic, right? And so what do they actually sound like when they talk? And I have to stop myself from going down that rabbit hole because it doesn't matter. But the ones I can say, I created 2 clans. I think I created 3 clans for Chimanther, and those are Berthissa Thurgiesh, that is how you say Mahen's original clan name, Berthissa Thurgiesh, and Kepesh Kmolek. And Shurajachi appears in Ashes of the Tyrant. And every other one, you talk to Richard Lee Myers, because those are his fault. What was your influence to become a writer? This is the story that my mother tells. When I was 2 or 3, I wrote my first book. Which means I told her a story, and she wrote it down and made a little booklet out of it. And from that point, my mother would say, "You're going to be a writer." And I would say, "That's really boring." I had it in my mind I was going to be an actress. I don't think I should have been an actress. And then I was going to be a lawyer, because I really like to argue with people. And then I read a book, and I'm not going to say the name of it because it's very impolite, but I read a book I really hated. The first time I ever read a book, I hated, because I was a voracious reader. And I went, I can do better than this. And so I sat down and I wrote a really terrible novel because I was 15. But I really enjoyed it. And I ended up writing 2 novels that year, as the English class I was in had a come with a semester project. So those were my semester projects, 2 terrible fantasy novels. And I just kept doing it. And I had this in my mind that I would do, more reasonable, more adult stuff. First I was going to be in academia, and I was going to be an editor, and I'd write on the side. And now I'm just like, no, I write. I'm a writer. So sometimes your mom's right. I think I've caught up. I don't think anybody has any other questions for me. I finished The Devil You Know 4 to 5 days after it came out. Read it during all my spare time. I love hearing that people can't put my books down. That's my favorite. That's my goal. So, how did you come to work for Wizards? Oh, so if you don't know this about me, I started out, my relationship with Wizards of the Coast started out with, I was an editor for their novels department. I was the lead editor for Eberron, and I was secondary editor for Forgotten Realms, and kind of for Dragonlance. There was an offsite editor for Dragonlance, and I would do all the in-house stuff for him. And then I would do a little bit for Mirrorstone. I'm kind of the catch-up person, because I was like the last one in. I started working there because I actually, before that, I worked for a small press called Paraspora, where I was an editorial assistant and then became the acquisitions editor, which meant I read the slush pile and I said, buy this book. Don't buy this book. Mostly don't buy this book, but that's how it goes. And that was great, but it was basically an internship that after I'd gotten to college. So I had a very small stipend, but I could not pay my student loans that way. So, and I had a day job that I was really starting to go crazy doing. So I started looking for other work, and it happened to be that Wizards of the Coast was looking for an editorial assistant, and I went, and I was very convincing, and they decided to make me an assistant editor, which sounds like the same thing, but it's not. It's actually a much cooler job. You get to do more stuff. You do have to do a lot of proofreading, though. So that's how I got to work for them. And from there to writing is that little bit of a luck thing. But I did have, my first book was The Godcatcher for Ed Greenwood Presents Waterdeep. Sorry, I just saw Lane Cunningham join. Now I feel weird. No, I'm kidding. Don't worry, Lane. So I wrote The Godcatcher, and I got to write that because the editor, Susan Morris, was looking for people to fill out what's called a limited call. So for a limited call, you're trying to find people to write, let's say that you're trying to find people to write 3 books. So you need to get the 3 best books. So you don't ask 3 people, you ask 5 people or 6 people. And then you pick the best ones out of there. So Susan had a limited call for Edwina Presents Waterdeep, and she didn't have enough people. And she had seen some of my work because we were trying to work up a little writing group thing, which never worked because nobody had time. And she said, can you pitch me a book for this? So I pitched The Godcatcher, and she liked it, and Ed really liked it. Actually, because I worked there, that made her have to do more calls to prove that this wasn't a case of cronyism. She had to do some blind calls and be like, okay. And so she told me at one point that she had to get 9 more proposals that she could say, I like this one, before she said, I am running out of time and I'm done. So that makes me feel better because we are very good friends. But I also know that Susan has been my editor for Brimstone Angels, and then she came back for this last half of Fire in the Blood. She skipped 2. So it's very nice to know that she will tell me if something's wrong and make me fix it. So yeah, okay. So let's see. With a young child, there is no such thing as a standard day, but what would you say your usual work day is like? So I have 2 kids. I have, my older son is about 5 and in preschool 3 days a week. And then my younger one is 10 months old. So most of my work happens after they're both in bed. Fortunately, I have kids that go to sleep early, so they're in bed at 7:30, so that actually happens. When the older one's in preschool, the younger one is napping. So I have another couple days there where I can get a couple hours in, and I'll go drop off. I have someone watching the little one while he naps, and then I'll go to a coffee shop and work for a couple hours, and get a little bit done. It is very piecemeal. It's not my favorite. I'm looking forward to next year when the older one's in, all day kindergarten, and I can get a little bit longer ride. Because my ideal is definitely, I definitely feel like my brain kicks in about 2 in the afternoon to 6, which is just the not happening time right now. But if you have kids, you do what you can. You get time confetti, and you cram it together until it turns into something. And I like using the kind of habit-forming software helps. Actually, I am on a beta for a habit-forming software called Gedig that I am enjoying. I hope you save the whole acronym, but I'm enjoying it very much, although I think I've been slacking in the last couple of days. Let's see. On a serious note, what's next after the Brimstone Angels? Anything planned or in the works outside of the realms? Yes. I am slightly overwhelmed. I am working on a novel, hopefully a novel series that's big and awesome and epic. And it's in the stage where it's hard to talk about because there's so many things like interweaving, and it feels like it's not actually something I can kind of present to anybody, but I've been describing it as an epic fantasy family saga, and I'm at the point where I'm starting writing and outlining it sort of at the same time, which is not my usual method. Is to sit down and my outline is a really shitty, sorry, I forgot your PG-13, a really terrible first draft that's almost just stream of consciousness, and lots of slang and lots of cursing, and I so just huge giant 30 to 60 page outline, and then I go back and I write, which is interesting because it's harder when you're doing world building at the same time, because you have to keep jumping out to do this thing, and then you know, like for Brimstone Angels, by book 6, like I know these characters, I know these people, like they're my best friends. They still surprise me sometimes, but it's not, you're not kind of going like, what is this person's like core drive, right? So it's interesting, it's kind of gnarly. But that book, I did write a short story as sort of a testing ground prequel thing called Mark of the Mountain Poppy that is in the anthology Hath No Fury from Ragnarok Press, which was a Kickstarter, and it funded. And I think if you did not participate in the Kickstarter, you will be able to buy it in March, maybe. I think Elaine also has a story in it. How hard is it to hold back spoilers from fans who beg to know what happens? Depends. Because there might be people on this thread who have not read the series. I said it in the beginning, just to kind of give people a chance, that maybe we'll hold off any kind of questions about the end of the series, just to preserve spoiler zone. There have been points in the series where people felt very strongly about certain things happening or not happening, and it's actually, you know, it's harder when you have a fan kind of criticizing you for something that you're not doing, because they are seeing this slice and they're seeing this slice from this angle, and what you're actually looking at more looks like this, and some people are, you know, seeing it over here and they're willing to kind of wait, but if you're just really here, it's hard to kind of. One of them, this is a kind of a minor one, and I don't think it really spoils anything, but so when I was writing Brimstone Angels, the powers that be felt that having a gay male character would be a huge turnoff for the readership, but I came up with Mehen, and that was just who he was. I knew he was gay, and I knew he was a veteran and a bounty hunter, and that he had been exiled from his clan, and he had adopted these 2 little girls. And so I was like, okay, do I just kind of shove that aside, or do I try to be sneaky about it? Do I just like slip in little references, right? Tick, tick, tick. And then until a point where I go, well, it's always been there. Nobody stopped me. It's not the most, it's a little devious, but that was sort of my working plan. So early on, there were people say, I would see people say things like, oh, Mehen's a really standard fighter, right? He's a really basic fighter. There's not really anything interesting about him. And I mean, I would argue that no, just on the board, but then part of me is like, I feel like you're going to change your mind. And then, you know, in the adversary, it's said explicitly. Even then, people kind of missed it. And then in Fire into Blood, it was like this right here. Just so you know, Mehen likes dudes. And so there's a point where it's like, well, it's not really a spoiler, but that's the one I can talk about without kind of possibly ruining a nice twist later. But if you finished it, no, I can't. I'll do. See, it's hard. It is hard. That's the answer. It is hard. Are you looking forward to working on your own projects compared to working in a shared world? Yes and no. It's funny. I find a lot of things I really love about shared world. And I have been approached to write in sort of for several shared world projects. And I'm making myself say, no, I'm going to work on this right now. I'm going to get this kind of with its legs under it. Because what I love about shared world is one of my favorite things. It's kind of like my editor. I can use my editor brain to write. Because in Shared World, you get this whole setting, you get all these pieces, and you might not love all of them. Nobody loves everything about the Forgotten Realms. There's something that bugs you. And that's true for the authors too. There's something where you're like, I don't want to write about that. And then there are things that are like you look at it and you're like, why is that there? And the answer is, like, the meta answer is, there are lots of hands in this pot. And so there are lots of visions shaping this. And so sometimes you'll get two things and they don't go. They don't fit. They don't match. And I love finding those things and going, well, what goes here? What makes those things fit together? I loved, with writing about tieflings, one of the things that I just adored was, suddenly tieflings look weird, right? Before the spell plague, tieflings can look like all kinds of stuff because they express this demonic background in lots of different ways. Or it's not demonic, it's a Rakshasa, or it's a devil, or it's a night hag, it's everything. And then all of a sudden now they're homogenized. And why is that? And I was so glad they let me, because I am the one who came up with the meta explanation of, it's because of Asmodeus. Because of this spell that changed things and changed the bloodline. So that that basically you have this dominant trait that carries down, and it's more of a curse than a gene, and that becomes so fun to play with. Right now you have this marker that you didn't ask for, that doesn't necessarily determine you, but it determines how people interact with you. So that kind of stuff, I love doing that kind of stuff, and you can't do it with your own things because you're making all those points. You only have one viewpoint, and ideally you've chosen all those things because they make sense. And then someone else can come in and say, wait, you have a hole here, you could fill with something really interesting, but you can't really do it because you could always just, and also you could always just go, oh, I'm going to take this out, I'm going to move this over. So I miss doing that. I love doing that. But there is something nice about being able to say, forget that, I'm just going to shape with this thing. And being able to add a lot. Through the years, there have been things that I've suggested to add to the story, to add to the canon, that have been turned out for things that, it's not my problem, sort of, right? Like, I think an example that I've given before is that I suggested at one point that the fate of Denier, maybe you have supernal, which is this language that is basically sentient. It adapts to hear. It adapts so that whoever's listening to it, it sounds like the language they speak. Unless you don't want them to know what you're saying, and then it sounds like, the sound of heaven or whatever. That's really interesting. It's a sentient language. I'm like, what if that's Denier? What if that's what happened? What if someone grabbed him and trapped him in the weave, and he became this language? Like, that's really interesting. And they're like, because then we have to explain it in all the worlds. And if that were just mine, it was just my story, I could do that. I could totally say that's it. But you have to respect that it's got to apply in all these other places too. So there's nice things about it. You don't get to play with off of other people, but you don't have to deal with the committee thing. Please tell me you're going to be part of Storm Talons at some point. Storm Talons is one of the things I have been approached about. I will say that. I would love to work with Ed. I think it's very exciting. I really got to do this thing first. So. Hopefully all the slots on people. It sounds like there's just crazy numbers of books. But it's really cool, and if you haven't checked out Ed Greenwood Group and what they're working on, you definitely should. Helma too. Actually, I think Helma is what I was originally asked about, but I have to admit, I've never done urban fantasy. It'd be kind of fun. Ken asked me, what keeps you going between your family and your career? You must be so tired. I'm so tired. Mostly it's the coffee. And you still managed to show pants on. Part of it is that this is who I am, right? I love to write. I love to tell stories, and I've done it enough that I know I can do it, right? That sort of self-doubt is the more times you achieve something, I don't think that voice ever shuts up, but sort of the quieter it is, or the easier it is to go, shh, we're doing stuff right now. So I just can't imagine not doing it. It's hard. It is really hard when you have to do all these other things. But it's this pull you can't let go of. And I have to admit that sometimes I am, when I'm not writing and I have to go do something else, even when it's something fun, even like I go out with my friends, but I really want to be home. I want to be home and writing. And so I'm not enjoying myself as much as I should. I'm just like, why am I here? I don't want to be here. I want to be working. I want to be like, you know, picking out this problem and creating this little, you know, cultural thing. And it's just what I really like doing. And, you know, I mean, it is sort of like, it's like if you have kids, it's like being a parent and you get time away from your kids, and sometimes it's awesome and sometimes you're like, oh man, I miss my kids. And as far as showing fans love, it's funny. I love that people are so appreciative of this, but like, I don't talk to people most of the day, so I love that I can get on social media and talk to people sometimes. And I spend like so much time thinking about this stuff, and most people don't really want to talk to me about it, right? I can't go up to the moms in preschool and talk to them about, you know, the ascension of Asmodeus and the structure of tieflings. I can't go up to them and talk about Dragonborn culture because I'm already the weird one. I don't want to. No, I'm kidding. So it's fun, and you know, and the fact that you guys care about this stuff too, and that you do love these books, and you know you have opinions and ideas about the stuff I love. It's, you know, it's like talking to somebody about your favorite hobby. What is your focus during the day to calm yourself and become centered? I love how you say that like I have one. I don't know. I take a deep breath. I think that's that's what I got. I take a deep breath. I'm not very good at being calm. I'm pretty amped up most of the time, but I get better at it. Kind of stay in the moment as much as possible. I would just like to say a big hello to Tenora and Nestrix. I love Tenora and Nestrix. It's funny to me because I did not expect a sequel to that book at all. I left it a little open-ending because I think there's something about a Realms novel that requires that, because there's this sense that the adventure keeps going and the story could pick up. But I really love that people responded so well to that because, you know, it's my first novel, and I really enjoyed writing it. I actually got a chance when the Sun Ring came up. They really wanted me to write about a human character, and I had a baby 4 days before. So when I was on the phone doing the conference call, and they said, "What do you want to write about?" I was like, "I don't know. I write about Sonora." And the more I tried to write about Tenora, the more I realized that taking Tenora forward in time was going to be really hard because of what I knew about the character and what I knew the character wanted out of her life. And I think she's someone who kind of, on some level, craves stability. And so I was like, you know, at some point I'm going to write Mommy Adventure, and I don't want to. Or I'm going to have to do something like, you know, I knew that she and Varen ended up together. And I was like, I'm going to kill him. I have to kill Varen. I don't want to kill Varen. So I ended up making a really strenuous argument to keep writing Brimstone Angels because I thought I could keep going with that. There is on my blog, there is the scene I wrote from the adversary that would have been, I wouldn't have been called the adversary, nor would have been called, but when I was trying to write a pitch for it and I was trying to figure it out, I wrote a scene about Tenora in 1485, whenever the adversary is. So it's about her, it's her and Varen and her aunt, and her cousin. Oh, and Sylvan's in it. So it was fun. It made me, like, it was really easy to write because I do love those characters, but it made me realize, like, if I was supposed to write a series about these people, it was going to fall apart pretty quick without doing some stuff that I would have felt bad about doing. You literally, so if you write another Realms novel, what would you like to be about? Okay. Things in the Realms that I wish I could have written about. I think Rashomon is super cool. When I started writing, they were like, no Rashomon, because there have already been many cool Rashomon novels. It needs a break. And then, you know, I was also location locked for Waterdeep and then Neverwinter. So that was going to happen. There's a part of me that thinks it would be cool to write about Mulholland. This is a thing you may not know. I really wanted to be an Egyptologist, not just in a sort of like goofy kid way, but in a, like, I wrote my senior thesis project on early dynastic depictions of the gods in Egypt, and like I can go on for a while about iconography of cows and birds, for, you know, because it's interesting. And so Mulholland is something that just drives me crazy. That's the one I should stay. I'm like, I should stay away from it. But I've also found that when something bugs me like that, I tend to care more about making it really cool. And so I think I might be able to actually do something pretty cool with Mulholland, given the option. But I don't know what that would be. And I love the Dragonborn, so I would probably circle Timanther until someone pried me off it, just to protect it. I don't know what else. I like Waterdeep. I would go back to Waterdeep. And I liked Cormyr a lot more than I was expecting. I sort of like got to Fire in the Blood and I was like, crap, I gotta write about Cormyr. Because everybody's written about Cormyr. There's so much. Do you guys have any idea how many books I had to read to write Fire in the Blood? And then I ain't even doing that. I had to have like Ed Greenwood and Brian Tortillo on speed dial so I could ask them questions about everything, because everything somebody said about it. Every room in the castle is named, every building on every street, it seems like. It's a lot of fun, but there's definitely, like, you gotta keep your eyes open. But in the end, I kind of carved a nice little niche, and I think that's my favorite book. So there is a part of me that's like, wow, I want to go there, and I want to write about Marana Goldfeather, because I love her. You were going to miss you talking about these books. Yeah, but see, like, you can just kind of poke me in the right direction, and you may have noticed I talk a lot, so I'll just go running. Any insight on the future of Realms novels? This is basically NDA, guys. I can't talk about business decisions, but I can tell you that so far as my future is concerned, probably not. I will never say never, but I got a lot of cool things to do, right? What makes you run to the keyboard when you're not in the mood for dreaming up a story? Like what makes you, when you're not in the mood, how do you write? You know what I tend to do is I if I'm answering your question right, like how do you get writing when you're not feeling it, I tend to use like programs that like I love this program called Write or Die, where you have to write. You just write, and if you stop, if you get distracted, it'll start punishing you. They also have one where it'll reward you, but I definitely respond more to the stick. So if you can have it so if you stop writing, it'll show you a picture of a scary spider, or it will play an annoying noise, or the one I like, it will start deleting your words. And the screen will turn red to warn you it's coming, and then... And what's nice about that is I think a lot of the time when you're not in the mood, there's sort of two reasons for that. One is that you're stuck, that something is not clicked together, right? And so writing will kind of help you work past that, but you kind of get all the junk out. And the other time I find I don't feel like writing. I mean, we're excusing stuff like I have the stomach flu. I'm not writing if I have the stomach flu. And I'm okay with that. But the other one being, sometimes you get a little bit out of practice and out of the groove, and you start to build up the block, and you're like, well, it's hard, right? I think it's hard, and I don't want to do it and not actually get anything done. And the nice thing about Write or Die is that you just write, you just get it out. And there is something about that practice, like once you start moving, once you start getting the words out, then more of them come. And I'm a big believer in like getting the crap out before you get to the good stuff. I highly recommend that, especially if you're like me and you're very easily distracted when you don't want to do something. I think that works really well. You can do it, longhand too. But the nice thing about the Write or Die is you can then, if you do make something nice, you can save it and paste it into your document. You don't have to retype things. Would you consider writing a story about Ilfarn or Back in Time when that would happen? Maybe. I am not so fluent in Realms history that I know all the details to say yes or no. I am very fluent in... Where's Squirrel? No, I'm kidding. I am very fluent in certain areas, particularly in the ones where I got to make up a bunch of stuff. But I would never pretend I know everything. My personal favorite fantasy novel. Oh, I hate this question because I like a lot of them. One of my favorites is this one. And I like it for writery reasons. It's called The Privilege of the Sword. It's not really magic-y, which is... I do actually really like lots of magic, cool, like, special things. This is sort of a, like, alternate Europe kind of feeling thing about a girl who gets kind of summoned by her crazy uncle. And she thinks he's going to, like, present her to society. But then it turns out he is, he's crazy, like, legitimately crazy. And he's going to train her as a swordsman. And I love the way it's structured. She does some really interesting things with point of view. And I enjoy the characters. There's also, the book before it, Swords Point, is also very good. But I keep it out here because I like the structure of it. What else? Right now I'm reading with my son the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, which is a set of kids' books, but I'm reading them and I'm like, oh my god, this made some really, like, serious impacts on baby writer Erin, I think, that I don't think I realized were there. My favorite book is, it's not fantasy actually, it's science fiction, but it's kind of a soft science fiction, called To Say Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis. It's a time travel, and it's a comedy, and it's delightful. I love it so much. Actually the villain in Godcatcher, what's his name? Faremo. Faremo is supposed to be a gender-swapped version of this character, Tossie, from To Say Nothing of the Dog if she was evil. So, I don't know if that's going to come across. Isn't it the best? I love that book. I also, my second son, I named him after one of the characters because I literally love this book. She actually, I like all of Connie Willis's books. One time I got introduced to Connie Willis and I was so excited I almost fainted on her. But she was very nice. Okay. I haven't read a lot of Realms novels. Is Farida introduced before Brimstone Angels? No, that is Farida's first book. It's Brimstone Angels, Lesser Evils, which is also sometimes sold as Brimstone Angels, Lesser Evils, The Adversary, Fire in the Blood, Ashes of the Tyrant, and Devil You Know. So 6 books, no short stories. They didn't do short stories when I was reading it, so. On the screen. My husband is a software developer for Twitter, so it's boring stuff. It's code. If you mean this thing over here, that's my whiteboard, which I have terrible handwriting and it's backwards anyway, but it's notes for a new book. What novel was your first read book? Like, what was the first book? I'm not sure I understand the question. Was that the first book I read, or, it's weird because people will ask me questions about books I read as a kid, and as a child, I read so fast and so frequently that it's kind of just a soup. I have a really hard time remembering what books I read because I basically read every book in the library that had a fantasy sticker on it. Which, the weird thing though is I didn't read a Realms novel until I was an adult. Before I got to, when I was going to go work at Wizards of the Coast, I was like, I should read some of these. Because my library, I guess my library didn't have them, or maybe they were just always checked out, but somehow I didn't encounter them. And the thing that drives me crazy is that once I did start writing for them, people I knew, I got like on Facebook around the same time, and people I knew, who I knew from high school were like, oh my god, I love Forgotten Realms! Oh, Threat from a Sea is my favorite series! Oh my god, you work with Melon! I'm like, where were you? Right? Like, you couldn't have loaned me these books? Like, I was very clearly in the target audience and nothing. Same thing with Dungeons & Dragons. I didn't play Dungeons & Dragons until I was an adult because nobody ever brought me into the game. Wait, what code is? Code is awesome. Is totally gobbledygook to me. I can't help it. I don't know. I can handle, like, people languages, but computer languages, they're not my thing. I told someone recently, like, I'm basically a step above understanding there are not little elves in my screen making things happen. I'm a step past that. But he's basically a wizard. Favorite epic fantasy-based movie? Ooh, that's a good question. Movies are, I don't go to the movies a lot. I don't watch a lot of movies. I get really antsy in the middle, and then I want to, like, read a book while I'm watching a movie, which drives everybody crazy. Sorry, I just saw the next question. I'm trying to think of an epic fantasy movie. Oh, okay. Okay, so epic fantasy movie. Let me think about it for a minute. Somebody recently just posted about a cartoon movie called Flight of Dragons, and I was like, oh my god, I remember that movie. I loved it. As a kid. I liked the Lord of the Rings movies. What am I forgetting about? This is the thing, you gotta remind me of different movies because I don't remember. So the next person asked, you're from St. Charles. I've got to ask, what high school? I went to St. Charles West in St. Charles, which is a suburb of St. Louis. If you're from St. Louis, this is the standard question, where did you go to high school? Because then it sort of lets you pinpoint which neighborhood did you go to, and in some cases, what socioeconomic status was your family. It's kind of funny. I don't know how well that plays out in other places, but okay. So the clarification of the question: what West read books from Eberron? Okay, they're all wonderful. They're all my babies, but other books, specifically books I think people should check out. The Thorn of Braylon series by Keith Baker is about an elf who's a spy who has like a really interesting secret history that kind of unfolds through the process. The first book, Queen of Stone, is about her accompanying a diplomat to basically like peace talks with the monster nation I've forgotten the name of, I think Droam. And finding out cool, crazy stuff. And the Queen of the Medusas is a character, and she's amazing. And then I would definitely suggest that. And then Dawn Bassingthwaite's series, The Legacy of Deccan, which is about the Goblin Kingdom, and it's this really cool kind of like succession. It's a succession drama, and it's got some really interesting characters, and how do these sort of civilized races deal with the fact that there's this kingdom run by goblins, and when the king gets axed, like, what do you do? And those are two of my favorites. I worked on you know what's another one you should read? The Shard Axe by Marshall Rockwell. And I love this book because it's a fighter of a book. They almost canceled it so many times, and I kept pulling back out and be like, put it in this slot, now put it in this slot. And it did finally get published to tie into D&D Online. But it's delightful, and Sabira is a wonderful character. So I think those are my main Eberron suggestions, and like probably in an hour or two I'll think of some more. Magic or melee? I always play, well, I don't know. I play magic users. For a long time I kept playing sorcerers. And then I played a warlock. But now I play a paladin. So I'm all about the melee, but I frequently get annoyed the melee rules are so constricted, because I should be able to punch someone as I'm barreling past them. I'm sorry. I know it's 2 attacks, but I don't care. Or it's an attack and not an attack. Apparently it's a grapple and an attack. But what is your favorite Realms-based Facebook group? It's Forgotten Realms Archives, of course. No, you guys are delightful. I do like posting here. Like, it's hard. It's hard to post on fan sites when you're an author, because sometimes you want people to have space to talk about your work in and of itself, and their experience of it. But sometimes that can get a little bit aggressive, and so when you try to join in, you throw the whole dynamic off, or people start kind of griping at you about the fact that they really like Planescape and you ruined everything. I don't know, just as an example. But I feel like here there's a good, people have a good mix of opinions, and there's polite discussion, and it's friendly, and it's all nice. Like, it's not all like, huggy, but it's but it's polite, and I appreciate that quite a lot. See a Dragonlance suggestion. Nobody loves archers. Archers are fine. I don't know. But it looks like we're kind of winding down a little bit. I said before that if people had questions about the W-No, that or about the series as a whole, that they could ask them at the end, if that maybe works. So, does anybody have questions like that? I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I'll just talk for a minute and see if anybody says anything. Because if you do, you can ask them. I had a thread on Facebook, but the thing with that is that gets buried so fast. So if you're here and you have something you want to ask, I can answer it. But I don't want to spoil things for people who are not yet reading the series. So if you are trying to avoid spoilers, I'm sure you can go do something else. What inspired the choice of tieflings? That's a general question. I can answer that. The short answer is because I was asked to write a tiefling book. Originally, Brimstone Angels was supposed to be one book in a series called The Plain Touched, which would have been 4 standalone novels. The other ones were Dawnbringer by Samantha Henderson, Unbroken Chain by Julie Johnson, Sandstorm by Christopher Rowe, and then Brimstone Angels. Midway through that, before I started writing, they said they wanted to change things up and do series that were character-based. So in that case, instead of being book 1 or book 4 of The Plain Touched, it would be book 1 of the Brimstone Angels saga. Although at the time it was a very different book. I keep see, and that's a spoiler, so I don't want to say it, but I keep meaning to write a blog post where I tell everybody all the different endings that I had in mind. And I guess I can say, because it's not necessarily not the ending I used, but in the original book, which was supposed to be called Hell for Loveless Hearts, Farida died at the end, so that's not what I wrote. So they changed it to an ongoing series, but originally what they were looking for was a book about tieflings. So that's what I did. Any secret interests for my characters? Oh, I don't know. I find a lot of times when people ask, like, what would someone think about such and such? And sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I have a very definite answer. So before there was people were talking about playlists that characters would like, and I was like, I could not tell you what kind of music. I felt very strongly that Frida and Havilar would listen to the kind of music Mehen listens to, because that's their, that's where it goes. You get influenced by your parents, and they don't have a lot of outside influences at the start of the book, right? They don't have a very big peer group. But then if you ask me what kind of music Mehen listens to, I have absolutely no idea. I've heard people suggest that that he would probably like metal. Maybe, I don't know. But then I was like, probably whatever Mehen listens to. And then Havilar probably would get like a mixtape from Bryn or whatever they have now, a playlist. And it's probably, I would probably have a lot of Macklemore on it. And I don't know why I feel that way, but I feel like Bryn probably listens to Macklemore. Would the Tiefling twins have a theme song? If so, do they share one? I have actually got playlists on Spotify, and I don't remember the twins' songs. There's overlap. I don't have my laptop out here. I do have a song that I don't actually know the name of, but or leitmotif and playlist choices. Fair. There's a song that someone introduced me to by saying this song is basically the Ballad of Lorcan, but unfortunately I also don't remember the name of it. I'm not good at remembering titles, apparently. Most favorite character you play? Ooh. That's a hard question. I guess I kind of am partial to the one I'm playing right now. Her name is Vidania, and she is a half-elf paladin of a god called Inaru, who's the god of the Empire, so like law and order and stuff, except Vidania is kind of sort of like chosen. She's kind of chosen of the moon demon thing. And now she has this crazy sword that can control zombies and steal a little of her soul every time she uses zombie, that kind of glowy power. And apparently, if she gets killed, she's going to come back. She just found this out. So I don't know what's going on. I have an amazing DM, but it's a little bit like being a character in a novel. Someone just said, how about a heavy metal bard? And I just remembered, I did have a heavy metal bard. I did come up with, there were those Goliaths. I had a Goliath bard who played, I think she played a drum, maybe. But I was kind of going for something between tube and throat singing and like heavy metal. But the problem playing D&D as an adult is that frequently your jobs get super in the way. Sim seems super conservative, seems old classic music would be fitting. Unless there is a secret side to him. Yeah, he's got a secret side. You're gonna miss that part. I don't know. You know what? The one thing I know about Mehen is whatever he listens to, he doesn't care what you think about it. Mehen is very much the kind of character where there are only a few places you can come at him, and you can come at him and have him sort of care about your opinion. Like, for the most part, he's who he is, and go away, Squishy. He doesn't care what you say. I have never played an Awakened Animal campaign, and I hate to say I don't know what that means. Is it, what kind of animal am I? But yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say if you have whole series questions or W-No questions, everybody's been warned, so you can ask them. And if nobody has them, then we can keep asking me questions about... I actually don't know what time it is. I should check what time it is. Because at some point I have to go make dinner. Nobody read it. Nobody's read the book. Your favorite scene from the entire series? Oh, that's a big question. I really enjoy the scene in Fire and the Blood where Doll figures out what's up with Agma. I have been heading for that for a long time, and so it was nice to be able to kind of have him have that realization and write it out. I guess a lot of the ones that I love are like the kind of big emotional ones. I like the conversation Sessica has with Doll, the last conversation Sessica and Doll have. I like the scene where, man, see, now I'm drifting into spoilers and I worry, but I'm gonna go ahead because I warned everybody. I like the scene where Herbal realizes what he has to do in Fire in the Blood. I like the scene where Raedra realizes that Forel's dead when she's in the room with him. I like the ones where you get that like kind of real world feeling. And I think those are big ones. I don't know though, because I guess I like the kind of weird fantasy ones too, and funny ones. I don't know. There's a lot of scenes. That's a lot of scenes. Where do you get the swear words the characters use? There's a glossary of draconic words, and so some of them are kind of played off of that. Some of them I just kind of made up using the right kind of sounding phonemes, but some of them, like when the big bad swear word is to say like, I think it's like Karshoj Ard Lorcan Almanac, right? That structure is established in that draconic glossary that from Dragon Magazine, where you append an affix, a prefix really, that says this thing is someone else's, and then you say whose, and then it's Almanac is like name, but the Dragonborn use it to mean like your clan. So that means like basically F your whole clan. Except the thing too is that to remember is that Karshoj it's a big swear word, but it doesn't actually mean the same thing as an F-bomb, if that makes any sense, because the cultural taboos are different. But I have to admit, like, I avoided ever figuring out what it means because that's a big can of worms I didn't know how to open. If the twins had a chance to meet any celebrity character from the realms, what might they pick? Ooh, regardless of timeline. That's a good question. I think part of the problem is that they have a pretty narrow experience of stuff, so they might have a little trouble, like, knowing who to name. I think Havilar would pick Alusair. Because I know that for a fact she's read chapbooks about Cormyrean royalty, and I think she would think Alusair was badass. And I don't know about Farida. I feel like Farida is the kind of person where meeting a celebrity would make her feel really embarrassed, and that she might rather just not do it. Like if she met them and she didn't know they were somebody she should feel flustered about, it would be fine. But if, you said, who's a famous person you want to meet? She would go, no, bad idea. What was the hardest scene you had to write? So, that's a good question. Fight scenes are hard scenes to write. I have to plan them really carefully. So I would say fight scenes. Chest is pause. There we go. Okay. Anything that is involves a lot of people is tricky to balance because what you don't want to do is basically get into the position where you have a camera clicking around and just registering what everybody's saying. There's a scene in Lesser Evils where they discover, and because Kelly, I know you're reading it, I'm not gonna try not to spoil it because I don't know where you are. Where they have found out what's going on, at least part of what's going on, and now they have to decide what to do, and everybody has to weigh in. And I had to write that several times just to get past that click, 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 click kind of thing. And so those are tough. The adversary too was tricky with. When I wrote the adversary first, it was really hard to write Lorcan because I didn't know where he was in his head. He kind of just went along with everything. And if you've read that book, you know that he, in the final draft, is not going along with anything. He's really mad. But initially, he kind of forgave that Farida right off and was like, what do you need me to do? And it didn't ever feel right. So I had to do some serious rethinking for him too. When you write a scene in a battle that you played, like when I write a fight, I don't tend to write fight scenes like they play out in games because it's a different medium. Hardest scene to write in the entire series. Oh, is that? You guys are asking the same question. Have you ever contemplated adding me with a spell scar to the story? I did. You have to catch up. Yes. Spell scars I think are interesting, but it's hard to balance. The rule when I was an editor was if you want someone with a spell scar, they can have one power, but it needs to have a drawback so that you don't end up with people who are overpowered and the rules bend before them, and now you have a really boring story, which made some really cool characters, like Shadowbane and the gal from Miss Shore, whose name I am blanking on. I love that book though. You should read that book. The same kind of thing with Nestrix, had a spell scar, but it's interesting. It took me a while to find a character where it felt right to have a spell scar. And unfortunately, I did not get to write about him as much as I wanted to. And if you've read W, know I love that character. He turned out so nice. I thought about using your Realms Curses daily. Yeah, I love hearing that. Your favorite line in one of your books? So I signed copies of Ashes of the Tyrant with this, and I didn't realize how much I loved it until I had to find a line to sign W No copies with. There's a character in Ashes of the Tyrant, Shatai, who's a Polarion, and she says to Lorcan about the Brimstone Angel, Briseis Kikistos, that we are all someone before we become ourselves. And I don't know, I hate to kind of pat myself on the back for it, but I love that line. But I don't know, I find I like the interactions more than specific lines. If you like Alusair, aside from, she obviously appears as a ghost. I'm assuming she was badass, too bad spell plagues while the Remainder was destroyed, and that's true. It is too bad. Definitely, I don't know if anybody noticed this, but there is a brief vision which includes Alusair and Kaladni. I don't know if anybody figured out that's who it was, but so you get a little glimpse of maybe something that happened to her spell plagues time. Yes, sounds like those. Yes, that is the problem you get into. With fight scenes, it's tricky because you want to convey what's happening with so many people, but you don't want to try to tap on each of them, right? It's not a game. You don't make sure everybody takes their turn. How evil is evil? It totally depends on the situation. Was Dina Perlman an unusual choice for the audio? I had absolutely nothing to do with choosing the audio narrator. I cannot claim any knowledge of that. All I know is that people tell me that they love her narration. I can't listen to the audiobooks. It makes me really embarrassed for some reason. Particularly, I listened to the sample because I was sort of curious. And when people do Lorcan's voice, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. It's just weird. It's like somebody's reading my diary or something. The whole thing, but Lorcan and Farida's voices, I'm just like, okay, that's weird. It took me a while to get okay with the fact that people are reading my books, right? For years of hiding my notebook from people. But somehow listening to someone read it out loud I can't do it. But I hear it's really good. I hear she's really good at it. How do you convert game mechanics in a novel? This is a wonderful question. Some of them are really easy. Some of them are really easy to ignore. And some of them you have to really think about, you have to kind of deconstruct it. So a great example, I think, is hit points. So hit points are there to kind of represent a person going from hale and hearty to dead, right? But you don't actually have a ticker that goes click, 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 click in you, right? And going to the doctor doesn't go click, 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 click. But now we have these things like healing spells where you click up, right? But that's not how it works. So I know I've heard other authors complain about when you switch to 4th edition and you have healing surges, and they're like, I don't know how do you talk about that because we've gotten into this click, 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 click kind of thing. How do you click yourself, right? You don't have magic to do that. But the reality is you kind of take this and go, okay, this is symbolic of a person getting hurt or not during a fight. So take this out. Now think about a person getting hurt or not during a fight, and a healing surge becomes something like kind of giving yourself a little pep talk or something. In Brimstone Angels, there's a point where Lorcan is badly injured and he's escaping from his sisters. And what he does is he pulls his armor tighter to kind of put pressure on the wound, and gives himself a little space and kind of props himself up so he can stand when the hell wasps and the Irinis come. And to me, that's a healing surge, right? That's someone taking steps to be able to continue this fight for longer because you don't have those levels. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind, is that you're not trying to represent the game mechanic. You're trying to represent what the game mechanic is representing in its own symbology. By doing that, you give yourself a lot more breathing room, because some of this stuff is just, how would you represent, I don't know. If I talk too long, I'm going to go off on grappling because my DM didn't let me hit somebody. Favorite snack during gaming? When I game with crazy people, so we tend to take turns bringing themed hors d'oeuvres based on our characters. I don't know how this started, but it's gone completely out of hand. But we do have delicious snacks because of it. We just started again. We actually had a pretty big hiatus due to babies and work travel. So we just started up again, and I brought these crackers I made and some goat cheese. And I said they were imperial ration crackers, but I made them with gochujang, and elves like spicy food in this world because I said so. we tend to have fairly fancy snacks. My DM Susan brings pretzel rolls sometimes. Pretzel rolls and prosciutto. That's a good snack. Beer or wine? I like both. Did it cause any sort of trouble when it came to writing characters? Yes. Did it come at all cause any sort of trouble when it came to writing characters that are considered underage by contemporary standards? So it did briefly. The initial cover of Brimstone Angels came back, and Farida was wearing purple ribbons, basically. She was showing a lot of skin. And in Brimstone Angels, Farida is 17. So, one, I'm more bothered by the fact that this character is not somebody who wants people looking at her, so she wouldn't dress in a way that would kind of show off her body. She's kind of uncomfortable in her own skin, so it just doesn't make sense for the character. But what got me a little more, leeway was saying she's underaged. Like, this is kind of corny for that. But this, that's kind of the thing with the artists. They don't get to read the novel. They just get kind of notes. And when I said, I don't care what her robes look like, make it look pretty. And I'm thinking whatever color you want. And the first shot was this very, elaborate and interesting purple ribbons outfit. That could be tricky. You may notice I did make sure that Farida officially turned 18 and Fire in the Blood, just to forestall anything. But that got really complicated. I like this too. I also always imagined healing surges spitting out the loose tooth, wiping chin on the back of the hand and saying, is that all you got? Yeah, it's basically like doing the thing you need to do to keep fighting. And we represent that by ticking up the little clicker. But what do you do in an actual fight? I don't know. I've never actually been in a fist fight, but you know what I mean. Bring away for crackers. When was your first book written? My first published book was written in 2010. The Godcatcher came out in February of 2010. So, and then I've been a book a year ever since. Probably till 2017. That's probably not going to happen. Okay, these are just nice comments. So if people are winding down, I can probably stop. Because I could sit here and talk forever, but at some point, it's going to be excessive. So, one more check. There are no no questions. Nobody's going to want to know. I'm trying to remember. I feel like there was something I was waiting for people to ask me. I don't know, in which case I would just tell you, but now I can't remember what it was. No. Well, okay. Because this genre is loosely based on the Middle Ages. Women were being married off at 14. Now I'm going to historian at you. First of all, that's technically not true. Women were getting married in their late teens in the Middle Ages. Because Minarch is pushed way later when you're not well fed. So there's no point. Rich people, yes, rich people would marry each other way young. But if you look into it, it's more like 17, 18, 19. It's still young, right? It's still not going to be really shocking. But the other thing is really interesting when you dig into this, because the whole society is going to change when you add in magic. The life expectancy goes up. The gender dynamic is going to shift because suddenly women have a power that's equivalent, right? Like you can't just base everything on like how strong are you. Plus, there's the fact that you get into the what do you want this game to be, and do you want to say you have to be this to get this kind of score? But it gets really interesting because when you start to get into that, your cultures all shift just by this one addition. But okay. Sorry, no, I'm going to just answer nerd out. What's for dinner? Oh, geez, I don't know. Keep talking. If you did not see everything on this, it stays. You can watch this video. People will be probably watching this video for, I don't know. Love the strong female characters. Does your next book have a strong female lead as well? Yes, always. I just like those characters too. My next book, the main characters I think there's 5 point of view characters. 3 of them are women. The kind of core characters are 2 sisters and a brother. And it's sort of their dynamic in the context of this sort of socio-political upheaval, and trying to they're from a place, a kingdom. I don't know what you exactly call. I haven't figured out exactly what to call this space, where it's a bunch of tribes, but originally there was a bunch of tribes ruled by this person who is kind of like a pope almost. Like it was this person, this sort of spirits of the land talk to, and they can do this prophecy, and they're called the speaker. And it's only people in this bloodline that the spirits are going to talk, that they'll talk to. And so this other kingdom came in and killed the speaker and wiped out a lot of that bloodline. But some of these, basically the heir to the speaker was this prince who got around a lot, and so some of his bastards have been saved, and so these 3 kids are some of the bastards, and the question is sort of which of them is the speaker, and how did the relationship sort of shift around that. So, how about your favorite magic item? That's a good question. I kind of love it when stuff like the Deck of Many Things comes out, but I'm not playing a character that's gonna mess around with the Deck of Many Things, so... but I think it's really fun. I love percentile dice. It's dangerous, but it's exciting. What was the cause of the choice to have such a strong yin-yang component with the twins? I have 2 sisters, and I realized as we kind of got to be adults that there's this strong tendency to kind of look at your siblings and determine who you are and what you can be based on what they are. My sister, for a long time thought she wasn't that smart because I was the smart one. But she's very smart. I mean, she doesn't have to determine, and as an adult, you're like, oh, I don't have to actually determine myself in this. And at the same time, she would sort of declare herself to be the pretty one, and which, then makes me think, well, I'm not. And the more I talk to people, the more I realize things like this. I remember having a conversation about this when I was first creating it, with Bruce Cordell, and he was saying, that's funny because my brother, ran track and he was really fast, so I just assumed I couldn't run. And as long as I'd known Bruce, like, he went for really long runs. It's like, yes, you run, you're a good runner, but your brother's better. So you get into this place where you're like, I'm, this one's the troublemaker, so I'm the good one. So what happens when the good one makes trouble and throws all of that out? And at that point in your life, I feel like when you're starting to become an adult, those labels get really hard to decide, like, I'm holding on to or not. And you're differentiating from your family of origin, and it creates a lot of really interesting conflicts. And it does, I think, make people hold on tighter to those aspects of their identity and sort of shift around to kind of keep the other person in that same dynamic. So if I'm going to pull this way, well, I'm going to move around and stick with you. Wait, let me scoot. I got lost. How do you help the younger generation get started on writing? It's one of those things that's hard. I think the best advice is to just do it and don't worry about doing it the best you can, because you will get better. The more you do it, the better you will get. And to finish. Wow, finish. Before I got to the point where I could finish stuff, it's really easy to doubt yourself when you never get to the end, because you get into the middle and you think, well, I'll never get to the end of this. I'll never be able to make something really great. So finish and just do it and finish, I think, are the most important things. And read a lot. Before I started writing before I adult wrote, not, teenager crazy, right? I think when you're young, you have an invincibility, where you write and everything is perfect and it just comes out and comes out and comes out and comes out. But I spent about less than a year living in an RV, and driving around the country. And if you want to read books in an RV, you run into a little bit of trouble because, one, it's expensive, so you're saving money, but also you can't get a library card in everywhere you stop. Because your address can't be your parking lot for the next week. So what I did was I would go to Goodwill, and Goodwill would sell books for $1 each or 10 for $1. So once you find 4 books you want, you need to find 10 books you want. And in doing that, I read a lot of things I wouldn't have read before. I think I read my first true crime novel. I read my first Western. I read my first vampire novel. And it, you know, it just piles up, and you get to experience a lot of things. And I think that's really wise. I think the more, if you keep going back to the same well, you're not kind of inoculating yourself with new ideas. So grabbing as much as you can and feeding your brain from as many places as possible, from as many food groups, if you will, can really improve your writing and give you a lot of great ideas. Lake Elizondo, it looks like, oh, that you got it again. Okay, I'll go back to it. What's the most prolific piece of wisdom you gained from the older authors? Do you know what the best advice I got from the Sundering? First of all, oh my God, you guys, I'm so lucky, right? I had 5 really brilliant, well-written, like, authors who'd been around for ages, giving me advice and, you know, just kind of being there to talk to and to kind of listen to, more importantly, listen to. But the best advice I got from each of them individually, it was kind of funny, was not to get too invested in, like, in reviews, in what people say, because everybody experiences your book from their own perspective, from their own place. And for every person, that's the most important version, but you can't make everybody happy. And so there's always going to be people out there who think I wrote Twilight and the Realms and I can't do anything about that. But at the same time, really reading all the positive stuff is a good way to make yourself go crazy too. Because, you know, you can still do better. And so focusing on what you're doing and not so much on what you've done is really valuable. And it was very good for me to hear this, because I went from being a little pokey, you know, brand new Realms author who's, you know, writing paperbacks to being in the biggest series in a while. And so I had a lot more people reading my books, and a lot of those people were not the audience. I didn't write the book for you if you hate teenage girls. I can't do anything about that. So kind of being warned ahead, like, you're going to get hit, was really, really helpful. Because I think until then, I don't think I'd ever gotten anything but a 5-star review, because I think maybe 60 people were reading my book, it seemed like. So that's a little special, a little specific, but it was really, truly the best thing I could have heard. How much, I listen to books on Audible, how much say do you have in that production? Usually they will request a list of a pronunciation list of words. If it's not, they have a master list, and what they used to do is they had someone who kept the master list and then would kind of go through the book and pull out all of the invented words and then send you the ones that weren't on the master list and say, how do you say this? And so I have that level of input. And sometimes my answer is, I don't care how you say it, just however it feels right. Here is what I would do, because I think the narrator knows best. What was your favorite scene now that the story is done, at least for now? I did answer it sort of, and I think my answer was Dahl, and figuring out why he fell, and what was up with Ogma. Do I know the guy behind you right now? Yes, this is my husband. He is working. We share an office shed, but he's got headphones on, so he doesn't know what I'm saying. The debate is tonight. So, which do you like more, ice cream or frozen yogurt? Oh, I don't think he'll say hi, because I think he's got his music turned up really loud. You just shared in writing the world does not have any, which been writing for several decades each. Is that something you would favor doing again? Would you rather write your own worlds independently? I would do it again. I think it was really fun. I want to try writing on my own first. I think there's benefits and drawbacks to each, because it totally depends on where you're working and what kind of story you're trying to tell. How you gather more background on your characters. It kind of just comes up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I already said we're into the spoiler phase, so I'll say this. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know I was doing until I realized it was going on. And a really great example of that is Alyona. So if you've read the whole series, you know that Alyona is Briseis Kakistos' twin sister. So when I first started this, I didn't really know. I kind of knew Briseis Kakistos was a thing because I knew that that Lorcan had collected Farida for a reason. I wanted it to be a reason that wasn't very Faustian, that was really kind of nerdy, right? Like, he has this cool special collection, and it's better than these other people's cool special collections. And vast swaths of the Hells do not care, but you know, these collectors, they really care. I didn't know she was called the Brimstone Angel until I was writing it. I remember emailing my editor and being like, does this sound really corny? Because it was honestly, I had to come up with a title, and it was just two words jammed together, basically. A friend of mine thought of Angels of Brimstone, which sounded, because he thought it sounded badass, and then I said it the next day, and I forgot it was that. I went for Brimstone Angels. Before that, they were going to call it Hellfire Twins, and I was really desperate not to call it Hellfire Twins, because that sounds like a softcore porno to me. So anyway, by the time I got to Adversary, I realized I wanted Briseis Kakistos to show up. And so I had a little more sense of who she was and what she'd done. Actually, in Lesser Evils, it comes out. Yeah, that's right. So in Lesser Evils, I was starting to figure out who she was. And then in Adversary, it was more. And I really thought she was just like some crazy evil genocidal warlock. There's a line in Fire in the Blood where Briseis Kakistos possesses Brynn and Constancia turns her and drives her out. And I described like two voices twining together, and I was like, oh, it sounds like there's two ghosts in him. And I went, wait, what if there's two ghosts in him? Oh my god, what if she's got a sister? Oh my god, that would explain a lot of stuff. Because I dropped a lot of things. I'm like, well, like, Farida's got this weird eye, and, you know, there's times where, you know, it would make more sense for this ghost to be nicer. And I kind of went, whoa, okay, there's something else going on here. And so then I started seeding hints about Alyona. But before Fire in the Blood, I didn't know Alyona was a thing. So this is a kind of example. I feel like when you're writing a long series, there are times where you know something goes there, and you kind of slide it in. And then as you go, you realize why you did that. It does feel really... You know, I actually, as long as I'm not spoiling, but as long as I'm talking about the last book, Garago is another great example. I didn't know he was Kaisis. He's just some guy in the prologue of Brimstone Angels. And then every time I mentioned this village, like, that was the detail I mentioned. I would talk about Garago. Garago gets mentioned in every single book. And I realized when I was outlining The Devil You Know that they really needed to go back to Arushvayim. That there was this circle there. That Farida had to go back and face this. That it was almost, I was like, you know, it feels a little like the hero's journey, right? You have to go through the threshold of the land of the dead, and you have to face the gatekeeper. Well, who's the gatekeeper, right? Well, Criella is a good gatekeeper, and I don't know, Garago's there. Who's Garago? Why is he important? Oh my god, what if he's Kaisis? When I realized that, I just flipped out. I stopped. I was in the middle of an email to my editor coming up with these ideas, and I stopped and I called her and I walked around the block. I was like, oh my god, I have the best idea, or I have the worst idea. And I loved it because it explained what I was doing. So some of that is just sort of trusting your instincts. Let's see. Speaking of magic items in your trilogy, that cursed, it's a sextet. That cursed box in your book was interesting. The one the succubus consumed. Oh, in Brimstone Angels, the Rohini has a box that has the piece of... What is in that? It's like a piece of spell plague or something. Man, why can't I remember what that is? I think that's what you're talking about. But I don't think... I needed something to change her because the game Neverwinter... this was kind of a complicated thing. So the Foulspawn Prophet was going to be a villain in Neverwinter, and originally I was going to have Rohini. Rohini was my character, and I was going to have her corrupt the Foulspawn Prophet and fail because the Foulspawn Prophet was already corrupted by the Abolithic Sovereignty. But then I sent my outline. They sent my outline to Cryptic, who was doing Neverwinter at the time, and they said, the Foulspawn Prophet's a woman. Did no one tell you? They had changed it in the meantime. I was like, okay, well, you know, it could be fine. Succubus is, well, one, she could be a lesbian. Two, succubuses can change their shapes. She could look like a dude. Oh, but wait. Three, what if the succubus is the foul spawn prophet? What if they think it's going to be this guy, but they take Rohini instead? So the Hex Locust was something that went in the Neverwinter campaign guide, but I knew I needed something to change her so that she would be a puppet of the apoplectic sovereignty. I think that's the answer. Frozen custard. Yes, I agree. When I was a kid in St. Louis, like, we had a frozen custard place nearby. Who was your favorite author to work with? Oh, like as an editor? Oh, I'm not allowed to pick. Nope. They're all wonderful. No, but really, I worked with so many delightful people. Really, I think all the Realms authors I can think of were just a joy. Yeah. I don't want to pick anybody. Christopher Rowe and Julie Johnson are two I got to work with that I did really love. I very briefly worked with Eric to be at a point when I should not have been taking on projects, so I didn't get to finish doing much with him. But I know Eric, and he's wonderful. He's a really great guy. And what did I tell him? I did the Citadels, so that's Ed Gentry and Jess LeBeau and Mark Sested. Mark was also an editor, and Mark is also a big anthropology geek, so we would get in some really great discussions and some really great arguments about what made sense and didn't make sense. He also was very big about structure in his novels, so again, but he's really fun to work with, and I really like his books too. Who am I forgetting? Oh, James Davis. That was a creepy book. And then I did The Wild, so that was also Jenna Helland and Jack Koki. I worked with a lot of people who were kind of new to the Realms, because I mostly for the Realms did standalone stuff. In Eberron, I inherited a lot of Mark. Mark was the Eberron editor initially, and then he left, and I got to take over his. And that was Don Bassingthwaite and Paul Criley, and who are both brilliant, and Keith Baker, who's wonderful. And by the way, if you are not paying attention on Kickstarter, he has a game called Illimat I got to play, and it's amazing. Marcy Rockwell. I think that's everybody. I might be forgetting. If I forgot you, I'm so sorry. But at this point, it's been longer since I worked there than I actually worked there. So, is there more background we don't know yet? Did I have more background? I guess it doesn't. Where the Devil You Know ends with Doll was not as much as I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of give him a better ending and a better direction. I think it makes sense that Ogma would be a little like loosey-goosey with that, but that's the one thing. That was one I left very open-ended because I was still kind of trying to feel out where it went. I didn't write down a lot of the Dragonborn ancestor stories. Some of them I had in my head and I didn't write them down, but I think that's all I can think of. Secret stuff that didn't make it into the books. Wow, I don't really know. I'm gonna have to think about that. Mark's Chosen of Nendoin Realms book is very good. It also got one of my favorite covers. I love that sideways cover treatment. I have interacted with Bob. I've never worked as an editor for him, but he is delightful. He was so scary the first time you meet him because it's Bob Salvatore, but he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. I probably shouldn't say that. I probably should let you think he's really intimidating and intense. But he's a really, really good person, and I got to do a reading with him once, and he doesn't do readings, so it was a Q&A, but it was so nice. It was great, and he was very like he included me, right? He could have totally just ran that thing by himself because 90% of those people were there to see him, and I know it. But he was wonderful for kind of like including me, and it meant that a lot of people bought my books at the end of that. He was a really generous person. Any plot lines, details along the way that you just kind of dropped, hoping no one would notice? The doll thing is one that I think I could have taken somewhere better. So the example, I didn't drop it. I jammed it in there. Remzi in W Know was really supposed to be the impetus for a second series. There are points starting in Fire in the Blood where Havilar notices that her body looks weird. She talks about how her boobs are bigger, and Frida says they're really not. But basically, Havilar had a baby in the Hells. And so originally my plan was, okay, if I get to do a second series, the second series is going to be realizing that this baby exists, is now a child, and needs to be found and rescued. But ideally that starts with maybe Havilar is going to have another baby. And so Farida makes a deal with Asmodeus to capture some number of souls, maybe 6, because I was hoping it would be another 6 books, as sort of like a bounty hunter in the Hells. Like, so she's going to go capture these souls of these very bad people. But now she's sort of working for Asmodeus again, and that doesn't always sit well, right? And that could go a lot of interesting places. But it wasn't to be, and yet I had already seeded it. I had already made these little mentions. And so I had a choice. I could just ignore it, or I could jam Remzi in there and make it work. And I went with that one because I didn't want it to hang. And I didn't want people, because people asked me, they said, what is this? Is she pregnant? And I said, I can't answer that question because it matters. It's an NDA thing. I can't ruin another book. So I didn't want to leave people wondering. Anything you wanted to put in the books but couldn't because it didn't fit? Yeah. It's hard. I can't think of specific things. I had one scene with Frida and Lorcan that I wrote for, I think I wrote it for Adversary maybe, or I was going to put it in Adversary, and then I was going to put it in Fire in the Blood, and then I was going to use it as a flashback for Ashes, and it just never fit. But, you know, there's not a lot of them being a couple and what that looks like. There's a couple of glimpses of it. But, you know, it would have been nice to have a little more there so that you kind of went, like, I get it, even if I don't like it. So, is there, oh, that's it. Do you play characters from your novels? I do it in the charity D&D game, but I don't in regular D&D. And I did originally, I played a character, it's this weird thing, because I played a tiefling warlock named Farida before I wrote Brimstone Angels, but she was not Farida. She was a tiefling warlock with a twin whose name was Farida, and I think she might have been raised by dragon. I think she was raised by Dragonborn, but her personality was completely different. And so the book started out being kind of an idea for like more backstory, because her backstory was not sinking into the game story in a particularly satisfying way. I picked something that was kind of perpendicular to everybody else. But then when it needed to be a series about a character, I was like, I really need to start this at the very beginning. I need to start with her as like a teenager. And in doing that, she just completely changed. So like I played as Frida, but I didn't. Are any projects you were writing outside of Forgotten Realms? I am working on, I think I said this before, I'm working on an epic fantasy family saga right now. And I have a couple of, I just want to say I have a couple of short stories because they're still really nebulous and they're not done. Do you have any old Realms D&D ideas that you could retool into new stories? You know what's funny? My first book for Wizards was very nearly a Ravenloft book, because they had a Ravenloft relaunch. And so I had this, it was one where it was set in the real world, and real world people got sucked into the Domains of Dread. And it was supposed to be set in a historical period. So I had a, like, turn of the century, story set in, like, turn of the century Egypt, around sort of, like, the Egyptological boom. And so I had a young American woman who was sucked into a domain of dread called the Red Desert by a Dark Lord called the Eater of Souls, who wanted to take over her body. so that she could keep living. And I really liked it. It was a really cool story, and I have tried to re-concept, but it relies kind of heavily on the Vistani, and that's one I can't figure out how you work around without kind of writing something that's not going to be very appealing. But I have to admit, I have another book on the back burner that's a secondary world based on ancient Egypt, and there are aspects of it that I've kind of picked out. How many puppies would need to be sacrificed to get you to produce character sheets for your characters for amusement's sake? I don't know, because I have to admit, I know authors who write character sheets and then keep them going, but I don't do that, and I don't think about them like that. I have kind of a loose idea of what class everybody is. Obviously, I know Farida's a warlock, but like I don't know that I could tell you for sure what class Bryn is. He was supposed to be a priest, and then he rolled all the wrong attributes. So I don't know. Please don't sacrifice any puppies, though. 0. Negative 15. Favorite set of dice. I have a bag of them, and it depends. Sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're bad. If there's a rough guess when your next book might come out, 6+ months, a year, it might be more like 2 years, because traditional publishing is a little slower than doing tie-in. With the Forgotten Realms novels, they buy the book before I write it, basically. And so then I write it, and I'm on deadline, and the book is like done into the printer. There's not a lot of slowdown, and so that means there are things that regular books do that the traditional books do that the Forgotten Realms books can't do. Like I can't get reviewed in stuff like Publishers Weekly because there's not a book to hand to them before it's in the stores. So I think it'll be longer between the two, but hopefully there'll be other littler things in between. And I have every intention of starting a newsletter to keep people in the loop, and I might have little snippets. There's so many questions all of a sudden. How did you manage to make me hate Lorcan in one scene and then root for him in the next so many times? It's very impressive. That was my nefarious plan the whole time. I think, so this series is very much about an abusive relationship. So in some ways when people say, oh, you wrote Twilight in the Realms, I totally wrote Twilight in the Realms, but I did it starting from the perspective of, let's all agree this is a bad idea. I had a friend who left her marriage because it was getting abusive, and it was kind of a surprise to everybody because nobody saw that coming. And she told me something that was really interesting, which is that you don't leave a situation as long as what you're getting out of it is more than what it's taking from you. And so you can't leave someone who's abusing you if you are also, that's also your sort of your safety net and your anchor. And if you can't do certain things for yourself, that's practical stuff like financial stuff, but it's also emotional stuff. And until you can get to the place where you say, this is not worth it, you can't leave. And so that's one half. Like, it's really easy, I think, to write about a relationship like that and turn it into a sort of morality play and say, like, here is this evil bad guy who's hurting this perfect girl, and because you shouldn't like him. But he's a person, right? And the reality is that what happens a lot of the time is that people do like abusive people, and they can't see this person being bad, being evil, because, they're so good in this aspect. And so that's really what I was shooting for, was that Lorcan's not all bad. Nobody's all bad. Nobody's Cobra Commander. Everybody's got good in them. And sometimes the bad is just really bad. And finding your way out of something like that is hard. It's hard. And so, I'll see people argue that Lorcan's not a bad guy because he had a bad childhood and he's not always evil, and he gives Frida something she needs. And that's true. That's all true. And he's still a bad dude. He's still not a good boyfriend. So that was my entire point for Lorcan. And that even when you get to the end and he's kind of capable of looking at himself and knowing that he's not good enough, that he has to work on himself, that's not enough, that he can't undo everything he did. So he gets to go off on adventures. And you know what? If your character in your game wants to find him and fix him, power to you. Team Lorcan, you do it. What edition did you first start playing? I played a game of 3.5, a couple games of 3.5, and then into 4th. I came at this very, very late. And okay, now we have hit a point where I don't have any new questions, and I really do have to go make dinner, so I'm going to stop. But thank you very much for having me for way longer than I expected. Oh, no, one more. Any advice for an amateur writing trying to get published? Keep trying. Like really don't stop. And don't stop writing. I know a lot of people who will write something, and that's their thing they wrote, and now they're going to work on publishing it. And the reality is, I don't know anybody, or at least I know very few people who got published on the first shot. You know, I know people who write, you know, you write a book and agents don't want it, and then you write another book and agent wants it but publishers don't want it, and then you write your third book and that's the one that hits. So, you know, keep trying new things, keep reading, keep working, keep creating, and do it for yourself first. That's the most important thing, because like you're the one who's always going to be there. Okay, so thank you very much for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed it. And please go pick up copies of the Brimstone Angels Saga if you've made it this far and you haven't gotten all of the books. They are available on Amazon, and Brimstone Angels itself is available on // You can get a signed copy because that one's not a print. Thank you again, and I will see you guys around. Thanks for Forgotten Realms Archives.